The conference room lights were harsh, the kind that stripped warmth from every expression and carved out angles where none belonged. My dad spoke first, his voice calm in the way that stings more than shouting. "You're suspended until you apologize to your sister." A pen halted mid-note. My sister tilted her head, wearing a look of fake hurt, but the small, pleased curl at the corner of her mouth gave her away immediately. I stood beside my stalled slide deck, my thumb quietly pressing the remote, even though the screen didn't change. No one said a word. No one defended me. No one even shifted in their seat. I didn't object. I didn't react. I just answered, "All right." If he'd understood what that response would set in motion, he might have swallowed the sentence entirely. I'd grown up in a house where silence was sold as peace. It took me years to realize it was obedience. My sister understood that rule before either of us could spell it. When we fought over a school project once, she cried for 30 seconds, and my dad stepped in before the teacher could finish explaining what had happened. She went home with new supplies and a pat on the back. I went home with the same poster board and a reminder to be the mature one. I didn't volunteer for that role, but somehow it became mine. I still remember the day my acceptance letter arrived. A thick envelope with my name printed, sharp and centered. I held it like it might lift me into the future I'd worked toward for years. My dad skimmed the first sentence, nodded once, and dropped it onto the kitchen counter next to coupons and grocery ads. He never looked at the second page. 10 minutes later, my sister walked in waving an engagement ring, and suddenly the whole house was ringing with congratulations, champagne toasts, and phone calls. My letter ended up buried beneath party napkins before anyone had even asked what the program was. That was when I understood that in our home, achievement never competed with spectacle. After my mom passed, everything tilted further. She had been the quiet mediator, the only one who noticed the tension in my shoulders or the nights I stayed up finishing work that no one else saw. When she was gone, the house lost both patience and symmetry. My dad's blind spot widened, and my sister walked through it like it was a private hallway meant only for her. The pattern followed us into the family business. I built the development department from a flickering, forgotten room into a full floor of engineers who trusted me. I knew every deadline, every system we rebuilt, every problem we pulled back from the brink. I didn't need applause. Results spoke loud enough. My sister, meanwhile, specialized in promising exactly what she didn't understand. 4-week timelines for work that required 3 months. Budgets that missed entire sections of infrastructure. My dad always sided with her. "She knows the clients," he'd repeat. "Just figure it out." And we did. My team stayed late. I stayed later. I fixed the gaps no one admitted existed and softened the blows she handed off with a practiced smile. My dad never asked how we managed. He just said what he'd always said. "Your sister handles people. You handle everything else." I didn't object. I documented. My folders became my voice. Timelines, notes, warnings, receipts. Evidence no one cared to read. The last project before the suspension was the clearest sign of all. She made another impossible commitment. He approved it before I even saw the email. When I pointed out the numbers didn't work, he looked at me exactly the way he had when I was 12. Patient, patronizing, waiting for me to fold myself into the shape that made life easier for him. That moment, standing in the hallway after the meeting, something finally sharpened inside me. I had spent my whole life being reasonable for people who wanted my compliance, not my clarity. That was the moment I realized where I stood, and the moment I quietly began to step away. The hallway outside the conference room felt colder than usual. People shifted aside when I walked past, not out of respect, but as if being too close might drag them into the fallout of a family issue no one wanted to acknowledge. No one greeted me. No one met my eyes. When I reached my floor, a new printed memo was taped by the elevator, a fresh org chart, a revised leadership structure. My sister's name in bold at the top of a column I had built from scratch. My title gone entirely. Not a mistake, a rewrite. My phone buzzed. A message from one of my engineers. Are you okay? Then another. Do we stick to your timeline? Then more. They're saying things upstairs. I set the phone face down and let it shake silently on the desk. My dad called soon after. He didn't ask how I felt. He asked if I grasped the optics. His tone was the same one he used when he tried to justify why my sister got the last piece of cake. Just let it go, he urged. Family matters. Family. The way he said it made the word feel strangely hollow. When I hung up, my sister was already standing in my doorway. She didn't knock. She leaned against the frame like she'd purchased the space. You can stop this, she said sweetly. Just apologize. She brushed imaginary dust off her sleeve, checked her reflection in the black edge of my monitor, and smiled like she'd already claimed her victory. I watched the smirk I'd seen all my life, the one that said she believed she'd never face consequences. I didn't argue. I didn't acknowledge her. I just felt a steady internal shift, something final, like a lock clicking closed. She waited for a fight she could dramatize. Instead, I picked up my portfolio, closed my laptop, and stood. That's it? She asked. I nodded, then spoke the one word she never expected to hear. All right. I shut my office door behind me, letting the latch settle into place. The sound wasn't loud, but it marked a boundary I had never crossed before. The room felt unfamiliar now, as if I were looking at it through a window instead of standing inside it. The glass walls, the certificates, the hum of machines, everything I nurtured, protected, and kept functioning for years, all of it suddenly looked temporary. I tied my hair back, the motion grounding me, then opened the top drawer. I began. I packed the documents I never allowed anyone else to handle. Project scopes, risk logs, meeting notes, approval histories. Budgets I'd rebuilt at 2 a.m. Folders lined up across the desk, sorted with the same calm precision I use when debugging a tangled system. No rush, no hesitation, just truth. I wrapped my degrees in soft paper and laid them carefully in a box. Every award followed. Proof of work the company couldn't deny, even if my father had always managed to. The walls emptied, turning bare and cold, preparing themselves for whoever would stand here pretending to understand what the job required. My laptop lit up again, with messages. My team, other departments, people who had watched the meeting and pretended not to see the imbalance. I flipped the screen downward. Silence felt simpler. Then I opened a blank document. Not to justify, not to defend, just to finalize. My resignation, concise and sterile. No emotion, no blame, just the clean separation from a position I'd already mentally left. Then came the real task. I opened the shared drive and assembled the record no one had asked for, but everyone deserved. Project trails, contract notes, resourcing sheets, every instance where my sister had overpromised on work she hadn't asked a single technical question about. I did not commentary, I didn't push opinion, I only gathered the facts they'd all ignored. 2 hours passed quietly. When the file was complete, it didn't look like an accusation, it looked like clarity. I hovered over the send button, not with fear, but with calculation. Timing mattered. Quiet plans don't scream, they land. I sent it to the board, the department heads, and the clients whose expectations had been distorted. Subject line: project documentation and status summary. My phone rang less than a minute later. The company attorney, a board member, 2 clients. I didn't answer any of them. I moved around the room gathering pens, notebooks, the mug my team had given me last winter. The only thing I left behind was a prototype from a project we had rescued 3 years ago. 40 hours of work in 48. Enough caffeine to rewrite a lifetime. a rare memory of teamwork that leadership never noticed. I straightened it and left it on the shelf. My sister appeared again, this time out of breath. "What did you do?" Her voice bounced weakly off the glass. Her eyes darted around the half-packed office. "You didn't tell me. You didn't—" I didn't respond. I placed the final folder into my portfolio and closed it with a soft click. She stepped in as if she were trespassing. "You can't leave. Dad won't let you. You're ruining everything." I slid my laptop into its sleeve. "No, I'm fixing what you broke." She opened her mouth to argue, to shift the story the way she always had, but the sight of my empty desk stopped her. The absence of my presence finally registered. She went still for the first time in years. I walked past her without hesitation. The hallway smelled faintly of toner and burned coffee, the odor of years I devoted to holding everything together. My footsteps were steady, deliberate, and cleaner than any victory I'd ever imagined. By the time I reached the elevator, I had already booked a meeting with my lawyer. A message from a recruiter blinked on my lock screen, an opportunity I had once declined out of loyalty. I swiped it open, responded, accepted. My dad called again. His voice filled the voicemail with urgency. "We need to talk. Do not do anything rash." But the plan was already done, and nothing about it was rash. I returned home just as the evening light slid across my living room. The house was quiet, warm, mine. I set the portfolio on the dining table, opened it, and arranged the documents in clean stacks. The order was soothing, the truth undeniable. One stack for contracts, one for payments, one for timelines, one for emails, one final folder that held the resignation letter waiting for a signature. I took a slow breath, pressed the pen to the page, signed my name with a steady hand. I gathered everything into the portfolio, closed it gently, and ran my fingers along the leather edge. A ritual sealing something irreversible. In the silence that followed, nothing felt chaotic, nothing felt wrong. There was just clarity. For the first time in years, I wasn't preparing to fix anything. I was preparing to walk away. This time, I wouldn't fix what they had broken. I arrived at the office just before 9. The lobby was louder than usual. Whispers tucked behind coffee lids, glances that skittered away when I looked up. Someone held the elevator for me, then pretended they hadn't when I stepped inside. The executive floor felt tighter, as if the air hadn't fully settled since yesterday. My dad's assistant stood near the doorway, clutching a folder to her chest. "He wants to see you," she said, but the tremor in her voice told me the request wasn't really his. I didn't answer. I walked straight to the conference room. The door was already open. My dad stood at the far end of the table, shoulders stiff, eyes red-rimmed from a night spent trying to contain what couldn't be contained. The company lawyer sat beside him, laptop open, face pale. A paralegal typed quietly in the corner, recording everything. My sister hovered near the window, arms crossed, expression pinched like she'd chewed something sour. No one spoke until I took my seat. My dad tried first. "We can work this out." His voice strained for authority. "Let's be rational." I set the portfolio on the table. The soft thud sliced through the room. "I'm here to finalize my resignation." The lawyer inhaled sharply. My sister blinked the first crack in her confidence. My dad's jaw tightened. "You don't need to do this." I opened the portfolio, lifted the resignation letter, laid it gently on the table like placing a card in a game that had already ended. "Suspension without documented cause triggers severance terms," I said. "Section 12 covers immediate vesting." The lawyer had already read my contract. He nodded once, confirming it. My dad blinked slowly, as if processing the realization that he had approved every clause himself 4 years ago. My sister stepped forward. "This is ridiculous. You're blowing everything out of proportion. All you had to do was apologize." I slid a second folder across the table. The documentation from last night. Timelines, contracts, payments, bills, email chains, everything clean, everything factual, everything she had pretended didn't exist. The lawyer hesitated before opening it. When he did, his face drained even further. "This is extensive," he whispered. My sister leaned over his shoulder, eyes widening with every page. "You can't send this to clients. They'll think I already sent it," I said. Her hand froze mid-air. "What?" My dad's voice cracked. I sent documentation to the board and to the project stakeholders. Status updates. Accuracy matters. The room dropped into a hollow silence. My sister looked at my dad, desperate for rescue. "Dad, say something." But he wasn't looking at her. He was staring at the stack of documents, the mirror he had spent years refusing to face. "You blindsided us," he said quietly. "No," I replied. "I revealed what you ignored." The lawyer cleared his throat. "Legally, she acted within her rights. Nothing she shared violates confidentiality. These are internal project documents and the contract terms are binding." My sister's voice rose. "So she gets to walk away after ruining everything?" I closed the portfolio. "I didn't ruin anything. I stopped absorbing the cost." My dad pressed his palms flat against the table. "We need you for the Hamilton account. We can't deliver what your sister promised. She didn't understand the requirements." He stopped, catching himself too late. My sister turned to him, stunned. "You're blaming me?" He looked at her the way people look at burning buildings, realizing too late they should have checked the foundation. I stood. "This isn't my problem anymore," I said. "I've accepted another position." My sister let out a hollow laugh, sharp and brittle. "Who would hire you after this?" The lawyer closed the folder with trembling fingers. "Anyone who values competence." For a moment, no one breathed. I reached for the portfolio. My dad stepped forward as if to stop me, then dropped his hand halfway. "We can still fix this," he said softly. "You don't have to leave." I met his eyes, finally level, finally clear. I already left. I walked out of the conference room, past my sister's stunned silence, past the lawyer's pale shock, past my dad's dying smile. I didn't look back. The elevator doors slid shut with a muted hum, and just like that, the entire system I'd once tried to hold together began to collapse without me lifting a finger. I left the building without checking if anyone watched. The air outside felt different, lighter somehow, as if the weight I'd carried for years had finally realized it no longer had a host. The city noise blurred into a hum. My footsteps sounded steady on the pavement. At home, the light through the living room windows was warm, softening the edges of everything it touched. I set my portfolio on the dining table, not with finality, but with a quiet sense of completion. The space felt untouched by the chaos of the last 2 days, a place that hadn't taken anything from me, a place that didn't demand proof. I fed Cooper, my dog, and he trotted across the hardwood floor, nails tapping lightly, ordinary, grounding. I poured a glass of water, held it with both hands the way I held coffee in the mornings at the office. The gesture surprised me, a habit carried from a life I no longer owed anything to. That night, I didn't check emails. I didn't replay conversations. I didn't anticipate fallout. The quiet wasn't heavy for once. It was clean. In the morning, I dressed without rushing, choosing clothes that didn't need to communicate authority to anyone. On the drive to my meeting with the new company, the skyline looked almost unfamiliar, like a place I was seeing for the first time rather than escaping from. Their office was bright, open, filled with the easy sound of people who didn't tiptoe around tension. When the hiring manager introduced me to the team, no one evaluated my presence against someone else's status. They just shook my hand and smiled. Later, standing near a wall of windows overlooking the city, I thought of the acceptance letter buried under engagement party napkins, the late nights spent fixing impossible timelines, the countless moments I'd stayed silent because silence was expected. And then I thought of the empty desk, the resignation letter, the portfolio placed on the table without drama, each act simple, precise, mine. Leaving wasn't a loss, it was an opening, one I had created with nothing more than facts, restraint, and a willingness to stop rescuing people who confused my competence for obligation. For the first time in years, the quiet didn't feel like erasure, it felt like freedom. In the end, I learned something simple. Silence isn't surrender. It's a doorway, a place where you choose what enters and what never will again. Walking away didn't break me, it returned me to myself. If you've ever stood in a room where your worth was treated like background noise, let this story remind you your life doesn't need their permission to change. Thank you for listening. If you want more stories like this, stay close. There's more to tell.